Because what happened for me is that alarm would go off and I'd feel the wave of anxiety because I'm 800 grand in debt. I'm basically feel like my life is about to implode. And so what do?
So welcome to the My Legacy podcast, where we help you create a living legacy and a fulfilled life. One of the things that makes this podcast special is that we don't just meet extraordinary individuals, we meet the people who know them best. These are the ones who've shared their highs, their lows, and everything in between, giving us deeper insights and understanding into what truly shapes who they are and the legacy they are creating. Mel Robbins, you've brought someone remarkable with you today, your daughter Sawyer. Would you do us the honor of introducing her to our audience?
Oh my God, I'm going to start crying. Because I can't believe what a cool show this is and what an amazing conversation this is and the intention behind what you're doing. And so thank you. Thank you for inviting my daughter Sawyer and I to participate. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be with you. And thank you for putting this conversation into the world for the person who is spending time together with all of us, because I can feel the intention to activate possibility and impact in the person who is listening. And, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm at her wedding giving a toast. So it is my honor to introduce you to one of the most tenacious, loyal, brilliant, and kind people I know. She is a real bitch. Am I allowed to say that word? When she's hungry or when things aren't organized. And the other thing that I'm going to tell you is that as you listen to my daughter Sawyer, you're going to be shocked when I tell you that the only thing that I believe that is a weakness in Sawyer is how high of a standard she holds herself to and how hard she is on herself. And I am so excited for you to hear the wisdom of this young woman who knows exactly what she wants and who just got back from traveling solo for 5 months through Asia on her own backpack, saved up the money, has been wanting to do it for years. She lived in Cambodia with her grandmother in 8th grade and spent 7 days a week teaching English to elementary school kids. And she has a huge heart and is just brilliant. And I'm so excited that you invited us to be here today.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mom.
You're going to make me cry.
And she's funny as heck. I mean, just she's the funniest one in the family, for sure. Although now our other kids are going to say, well, that's not true. You said that in the podcast. But
Sorry, can you introduce your mom to us?
Yes. Today we have the Mel Robbins.
I love you said the Mel Robbins.
The Mel Robbins.
Yes.
Who I think the world, oh my God, I'm already crying. Who the world just adores for so many reasons. And has had many careers that I wasn't alive for, but for the 25 years that I was alive has just changed lives every single day, and especially mine. And I know her as my mom, and the world knows her as one of the top ranked podcast hosts and motivational speakers and kind-hearted people in the world.
And that is legacy. Oh, that is legacy.
No question.
I love it. Well, we feel deeply privileged. We're all fans, if we can say that. We're all fans.
Big
Let's
fans.
be candid here. Big fans.
I think it's so cool what you guys are doing is getting someone else's perspective, and I think it's really cool. I know that a lot of people probably have their significant others or business partners on, or whoever. I'm excited to see all the guests, but having a parent and child relationship is, I think, extremely special. And I just have a very different perspective of her and look up to her like more than anyone in my life. So I'm super excited to share with you guys about that. And that's why this is my favorite podcast.
I love it. Well, let's get in. Mel, we've all heard through the books, the podcast, your incredible life journey so far, and so much of your legacy that was shaped from where you were raised, proud Midwestern through and through.
Yes.
So can you take us back, way back to those early days and some of the stories and moments that shaped your view of legacy and the impact you have made on the world today?
Of course. So I grew up in the Midwest in Muskegon, Michigan. And my parents, Marcia and Bob, hi, Mom, Dad, they both grew up inside of big family businesses. And by big, I mean it was a big deal because everybody had to work in them. My mom grew up on a big cattle farm in upstate New York. They raised Angus cattle, still do, and hogs, and sold produce. And everybody had to work in the farm business. And I remember being there one Thanksgiving, and we were about to sit down for dinner. And it was snowing, and this is outside of Buffalo, New York, so that won't surprise anybody. That was snowing at Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden, the phone rang, and the hogs had busted loose from one of the farms. And it was a location that was starting to get developed, so they had run out onto Transit Road, which is a 4-lane kind of highway-style road. And so that just meant everybody's now up at the table, and we're all pulling on the coats, and we're heading off to go gather up all the hogs. My dad grew up, his father was an immigrant from Austria and then served in the Navy here. And my grandmother grew up in Ohio in a coal mining town and met my grandfather because she was basically shipped out to the East Coast to answer an ad for wealthy people that were looking for maids. And they met very young, and my grandfather went into the Navy. And then when he came back, they both started working in a bakery. And over time, they ended up, just doing an earn out and taking over the bakery in downtown Chatham, New Jersey. And my dad grew up working in the bakery. And so from my grandparents on down to my parents, there is just in the DNA family. And God, why are you guys making me cry? I don't is that what this podcast is about, for crying out? Are you pumping something into here? Holy smokes. And so there's just this, I don't know if the right word is ethos, but that's what's coming to mind. There's a spirit of family, connection, community, and hard work. And, my mom and dad met when they were both out attending college at Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas. They meet. They're together for 2 years. My dad starts medical school. I come along. Then my brother comes along. But, even then, my mom worked nights for the IRS while my dad would be at school during the day. And I also remember my parents being very service-minded, because I get a lot of questions about, why are you such a warm person? Why are you so driven to want to help people? And one of the answers is because I've screwed up my life so profoundly, and I caused myself so much heartache and headache, and I caused so many other people's heartache and headache because I just didn't know. I either didn't know what I was struggling with, or I didn't know the right problem to solve, or I didn't know I was the only one to feel this way, or I didn't know I could ask for help. And if I can save somebody that same heartache and headache, if I can show somebody a shortcut, whether it's because I learned it the hard way or I've learned it for somebody else, that's a life well lived. And what I have been reflecting upon as I've been thinking about this topic of legacy and the extreme honor it is to be here and talk to you all about this and unpack this topic, is that even as a little girl, I remember my mom being very, very involved in Service League. And I remember how she would go down to the farmer's market, and it would take forever because she would talk to every single farmer there. Didn't matter what they were growing or what they were selling. She knew their names. She knew their grandchildren. She knew the dog's name. She knew how to pick out a peach versus how to, it was just amazing. And my father, every Thursday, would always go up to Shelby, Michigan, because they didn't have a hospital. So he would be in a clinic so he could be the surgeon on. And so there was always just this service minded thing. And the other thing that really struck me is I remember my mom's got a lot of moxie. And I really get a lot of my gumption to just try things from her. And I remember at one point, she and her best friend, Susie, decided they were going to open a store in downtown Muskegon, Michigan. And they weren't going to do it in the mall because she wanted to do it her way, which I just love. And so she opened it, a block away from the mall, and it was a kitchen gourmet store. Now, I'm talking 1982. This was before the big stores. This was before flavored coffee was a thing. And
It was during the time of Tupperware parties.
Yes,
probably.
yes, ma'am. That's
But,
right.
yeah,
That's
like-
right. And so she's like, I just want to do this thing. I remember they went to the bank that my parents banked, and my mom and Susie walked in, and they were just looking for a small line of credit to start this little business, right? And they were going to go to the Chicago gift show, and they knew what they were going to get because they were both big cooks, and they were all excited to sell the vanilla coffee because they didn't have that in Muskegon, Michigan. So they go to the bank where we have all of our banking, like everything, the mortgage, the bank, everything. And so my mom and Susie walk in there, and Susie's a customer too with her husband. And they go to apply for a loan, and they're filling out the paperwork, and the people are like, this should be no problem. And then all of a sudden they say, well, you're just going to have your husband's cosign.
Yes. Yes.
My mom. Hi, Mom. My mom stood up, walked over to the teller, and proceeded to start to close the counts one by one.
Wow.
Because she was a cosigner on every account. I'll tell you what, she got that loan. And so it also just struck me that in just little ways, you can make a difference in your community. That, you don't get what you don't ask for. And, just kind of the value of putting your head down and chipping away at things over time.
How's grandma? Is she like as excited and engaged as Mel says?
We call her Mousy.
Okay.
And so Mousy is, she's definitely a firecracker. I would say you get that from her.
Yeah.
And she's very, very strong-willed and has a very strong opinion, which you also get from her, and I also get from her. But she's like the most loving person, and I think really, although she may not show it sometimes, really loves you and cares so much about you and is so proud of her.
Now, how do you think that has influenced how your mom has raised you? I'm thinking about generation.
I think, obviously, growing up, the few memories I have of being a child was my mom had a call-in radio show in Boston. And me and my little sister, on whatever day of the week it is, would literally get taken out of school because we got to go to the radio show. And we would feel like celebrities walking in there, even though no one knew who we were, of course. And we'd go up to this tiny little studio, and you would tell us, Mom, that we were on air.
So in other words, I lie a lot.
But, no, Mel, it's called ninja parenting.
I love that. I'm stealing that from you.
And we would just we thought she was like the coolest person in the world, that she had this radio show, and we thought we were on air. So we thought it was like a whole show with all three of us, even though of course we were not on air. So that was like my early memories of her, is she was a radio host. And then I got to high school, and then she really started to get on the road for motivational speaking. And she was pretty much on the road like 200 days a year around
gone.
that. She was basically gone in high school. And so I feel like that, especially at that time in my life when I really was present to her and what she was doing, and being a moody teenager, I think that really translated through the hard work, and like you have to go and get it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come from staying at home or sitting around. And I think that watching her, especially as the oldest daughter, she's also the oldest daughter.
I'm the oldest daughter.
Of course, yes.
Oh,
Let's, yeah. I love everyone who's listening who's an oldest daughter and all daughters. But so anyway, the hard work, that mentality was always at a very young age ingrained in me, and just observing her and observing that she was obviously, like all my friends' parents, their dad was always gone. And their moms were always at like our soccer games and our lacrosse games, or baking the cupcakes or hosting the sleepovers. And I feel like mom would come, like she was always gone. And then she would come home and all she would want to do is hang out with us. And I think, if I'm being honest, at that time in my life, I was mad at her because she was always gone and wanted like to be near her more, of course. But I think at the same time, it proved to me that you can't just like sit around. You have to go and get it. And she was working her ass off. I don't know if you can swear, but her ass off. And my dad, of course, was working his ass off simultaneously, taking care of us and making sure we get to school on time and keeping us sane. But then I think you started speaking less and getting off the road more. And that is when I think her career really started taking off. And so the way in which I experienced her in her element and her setting, because I was not on the road with her, I was not watching her speeches, is like literally in the grocery store. When people would come up to her, or the cheese man behind the counter would like have a full-blown explosion panic attack because Mel Robbins just walked up. And it was every single person on the street that would come up to her, and the interactions. And that's, I think, where I experienced the whole mentality that you were talking about with Mousy at the farmer's stand, like talking to everyone, because when she's talking to you, she makes you feel like you're the only one in the room. And I think she gives just the like same amount of attention as she's giving all four of you and me to the person who walks up to her on the street from God knows where and wants to tell her entire life story. And she sits with them and hears them, and she always says, no matter what, I have the easy job. I give the advice, but you're the one who actually has to do it. And I think that is so special, because she always finds a way to put it back on them and make them feel like they are a priority. They are the ones that are doing this. And she's just the surrogate for the information and the tools that are, obviously she screwed up her life and then had to figure out and communicate, and does so in such an eloquent, simple way that people actually understand. And so I think that also trickled down through my grandmother, and just like her interactions with everyday people are the most friendly and present, and like, of course, let's take a picture. Of course, like, let me sign this for your mother that you just told me about, and so it's definitely, I think, made me a kinder person.
Mel, your career is defined by resilience, determination, leadership, and love. You've also shared that you hit rock bottom, and that was your catalyst for change. Can you tell us about that?
You know, Sawyer was very gracious in talking about the good things. There were a lot of bad things. And we have had a lot of, I would call it like invisible distance in our relationship. You know how when you have somebody that you love very deeply and you just wish that you could be closer, you wish you could have more fun, you wish it just sort of was more of a well-oiled machine, and that's like, and I screwed up a lot of stuff. I mean, I had ADHD and dyslexia and was not diagnosed till I was 47. And when that happens to you, what you develop is anxiety. And so I had a chronic struggle with anxiety. As a young mom, when Sawyer was born, I had severe postpartum depression. I could barely even hold her for the first 3 months of her life because of the medication and the severity of what I was dealing with. And it impacted our relationship. And when I was 41 years old, I was sitting here listening to Sawyer talking about the radio show, and I was so thrilled that she has a wonderful memory of it, because that was during a moment in time where my life was falling apart. And when that happens to you as a parent, you do everything that you can to try to shield the reality of what's happening from your children, because that's not their burden to carry. And what was happening for us is my husband had gone into the restaurant business, and it was really good until it wasn't. And at the age of 41, with 3 kids under the age of 10, so, I'm going to have to do the math. You were under 10 years old. We were $800,000 in debt and liens on the house. And I was rising to the moment like a dysfunctional human being. I was drinking myself into the ground. I was blaming everything on my husband, right? Because he tried to do this. And the simplest things, like getting out of bed, opening up bills, asking for help. I couldn't make myself do any of it. And I was the worst parent. I mean, there were times where she would come downstairs, and this I know you do remember, and she would find Chris and I asleep in the living room chair because we had passed out from bourbon, because we were trying to just suppress all the fear because it was just so overwhelming. I mean, when you can barely put gas in the tank and food on the table, I mean, that's a acute level of stress. And then you add on to it the sense that you're failing your kids and you're about to lose everything. And so for me, it was paralysis. And what happened is, I have learned from people who are far smarter that research this. There's a saying in addiction treatment and psychiatry that people only get sober when being drunk is harder than facing the things that you're scared to face. And what I've also learned about myself and human beings in general is people only change when they're ready to change. And if somebody in your life is not changing or they're exhibiting challenging behavior, it's typically because they can't right now. There's some skill that's missing. There's hope that's missing. And for me, that was a big one. What was missing for me is this hope that anything that I did would actually matter. Because when your problems feel that big, like what happens is despair sets in. And it's very hard to motivate yourself when you feel like it's not going to matter anyway. And that's how I felt.
And Mel, just a follow-up question. And what did anxiety mean to you? And what does it mean to you today?
So anxiety then was this wave that would hit me and paralyze me. It was like being nervous about something, but then you can't turn the nerves off. And anxiety has a purpose. I mean, if you and I are driving down the road and a truck swerves in the lane, your body floods with adrenaline, your heart starts to race, and you immediately turn the wheel. That's anxiety. It's an alarm in your body. And it's playing an important role. It signals you that there's something that you need to pay attention to. Now, I didn't understand that. Nobody does. And so what I, of course, did is I would feel these stressed out feelings, and then I would go up in my head and I would start to cycle. Well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And when you do that, you make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it becomes not a feeling, but it becomes the state in which you're going through life. And I didn't know what I know now about anxiety. So what I know now about anxiety is this. So if you stop saying, I have anxiety, don't ever say that again. Don't ever say that again, regardless of if somebody's giving you a diagnosis. And I've been diagnosed plenty of times, and I've been medicated plenty of times. But don't ever say again, I have anxiety, because then it becomes your identity.
Or would you also say, don't say my anxiety?
Yes.
My, because that.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. What you want to say is, I feel anxious about.
Yeah.
Because now you're labeling the feeling and you're identifying the thing. Because what anxiety actually is it's a crisis in your belief in self. Any moment of uncertainty in your life, whether you are applying for a job or you're, asking somebody out, or you're starting a podcast, or you're opening up bills and you're worried about any moment of uncertainty, you're going to feel that alarm because your body's trying to get you to pay attention, to do something. That's the purpose of it. But when you say, I feel anxious about, now what we can address is the real issue, which is you doubt your capability to face it. And you can always face anything in your life through what you choose to think about and what you do or don't do next. That is where your power is.
Wow.
And when you allow that alarm to take over, and all of us do because we don't understand, it's just an alarm that's hardwired in your body. And the mistake we all make is we go from the neck up. We go from the neck up and we think about it. You will never cure your anxiety up here because this is where doubt lives. You cure your anxiety in your body. And the definition for anxiety that I like the most comes from Dr. Russell Kennedy, who says that all anxiety is separation anxiety.
And what are you separated from?
Yourself and from God. Yourself and your power. Yourself and other people. Yourself and your ability to face anything.
And how is that part of your source?
How is that part of your source? Well, where is your connection to source? It's here. It's not here. And so when you go up here, you are up in the land of self-doubt and you're going to make it bigger. The more you talk about it, the more you make it bigger. When you say, I feel anxious about, you have now identified the problem, and now we can talk about your capacity and your capability when you separate back to your power and your belief system and your ability to ask for help and your ability to go to Google. Here's a good idea. You got a problem? Go to Google and go to ChatGPT and say, here is my problem, and act like the smartest person on the world and give me the 10 things I can do right now. And now you got a map to being capable. Because what happened for me is that alarm would go off and I'd feel the wave of anxiety because I'm 800 grand in debt. I'm basically feel like my life is about to implode. And so what do? I rot in bed. I stare at the ceiling. I think about all my problems. I then hit the snooze button, which by the way is making procrastination the first decision of your day. I mean, how are you going to win in life if your first decision is, I think I'll just avoid getting out of bed? And what happened is I would literally hit the snooze button 4 or 5 times in the morning, and then these guys would miss a bus. You probably don't remember this, but then I would thank God, and then I would come racing out of the bedroom like a lunatic because they would be waking me up. Bus would be gone. Chris was a very smart man. He didn't want to be there when I woke up. I mean, Martin, right? And so...
No comment.
Very smart man. You did good. And so, he didn't want to be there when I got up. And so they would be waking me up. And so now I'm yelling at them because I am disconnected from here because I don't understand what anxiety actually is and what it isn't. And I couldn't reconnect with myself. And that's also part of the neurology and the physiology of it. But you can reconnect to yourself. And so they would then miss a bus. Then that's just sent my whole day just down a complete wrong way. And so what happened is I just got this idea that maybe if I moved fast enough when the alarm rang, that I could move fast enough and beat the anxiety. That maybe if the alarm rang and I launched myself out of bed like a rocket ship, literally like NASA, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That if I launched myself, maybe I wouldn't be in that bed when the anxiety and the depression and the overwhelm hit. And it worked. And what it taught me, and this has been the thing that has really defined a lot of my career, is that you can build a skill in life where you learn to not let your emotions and fears about things dictate what you do. That you are not defined by how you feel. You are not defined by your emotion in the moment. I mean, if you really think about it, you can't be courageous without fear. You can't display confidence without self-doubt.
One of the things that I say to our daughter all the time is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's when you do it anyway.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's not feeling, when we're talking about her grandparents or we're talking about taking a test, it's not, Yolanda, not feeling it. That's not courage.
Right.
It's when we feel it and we do it anyway.
Yes.
I'm curious though, what was that impetus to make you even say, to come up with the,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. This is so it's like, okay. So I was sitting in my living room and the kids had gone to bed and Chris, again, smart man, nowhere to be found. And have you ever had a moment where you're giving yourself a pep talk? I mean, that is a low moment. It's one thing if you're giving me advice, but if you're having to talk to yourself, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, that's it, Mel. Tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, it's a new you. Tomorrow morning, you're calling your parents and you're telling them what's happening. Tomorrow morning, you're going to start exercising. Tomorrow morning, you got to look for a job.
How did it go?
Oh, well, I keep ticking off the list. And then I get to, and by God, tomorrow morning, when that alarm rings, woman, you're not going to lay there in bed like a human pot roast marinating in fear. You are going to get up and get those kids on that bus. And at that exact moment, a rocket ship shot across the television screen at the end of a commercial, and it gave me this harebrained idea. That's it. It must be a sign from God. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings, I'm just going to launch myself out of bed like a rocket ship. Now, I had 4 bourbon Manhattans that night, so that's probably, what also opened me up to it. But I actually do believe it was divine intervention. There is no other explanation because the idea is absurd. And the very next morning when the alarm rang, that's what I remembered. And I tried it and it changed my life. And it led to this belief that you're one decision away from a different life. That you still have to do the work, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is going to help you push through the work. But, I remember when Soy turned to me and she was in 8th grade and she said, I'm going to go back to Cambodia. We had visited her grandmother, who were in 7th grade rather. She was, as a widow, my husband's mom went over to Cambodia and started to volunteer. And we went over to visit her one Christmas. And when we were leaving, Sawyer was like, I'm going to go back. And I'm like, okay, well, that was a pretty big vacation. And, I don't think that's going to happen no, she's like, no, I'm going back next year and I'm going to teach in that school. And I was like, okay. And doubted her. But when I introduced her to you, this is a woman of conviction. And maybe it's also because of the distance that whether it was because I was emotionally unavailable or when we were struggling and my career took off, my ambition was largely about paying bills, largely about getting the kids back into town soccer, largely about restoring all of the savings that we had blown. And so I think it also created in Sawyer this, I can't rely on you anyway. And you can't tell me what to do because you're not around either, or you're not around emotionally. And so it created this, I can do this in her. And I'll be darned, she went to the principal of her school and she worked it out with them. And that next year she went back and spent 2 months living in Cambodia and took a leave of absence from 8th grade, and it changed her life. And then she said, I'm going to go do it again.
Okay, Mel, we all know 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Right.
The world.
Yes.
We seen the tech talk, read the book. We all love it. I actually want to turn it to you, Sawyer. Okay, so when those moments happen that the world now knows that story, was there a moment that you saw your mom in that transformation and you said, I want that strength in my life?
A single moment?
Probably not.
I feel like I don't remember necessarily a single moment that was like, I want that strength. I want to be as smart, as brilliant, as confident as her, and just so loved. But I think it was honestly the little things that added up. I think it was truly all the small interactions. And I think overhearing her on meetings and just like all of you have said, she's just brilliant. And
as are you.
Oh, thank you.
And did you notice that transformation? That moment that she described, from the anxiety, the stress, to that change?
Maybe
slowly?
last week, I think.
But candidly, and partially, I even love the fact that there wasn't a moment. Because even let me change my question, because I think we so often envision change being dramatic, the heroine arising, the melodramatic music and the Hollywood moment. And instead, maybe it was, to your point, a series of small things. And that's where the profound change is, because it adds up.
Yeah, I've always looked up to her more than anyone in the world. And I think it was hard because she was always gone in high school. And so I didn't really know what she was doing. I've seen one or two times of her speaking. And during those times, I was like, wow, that's my mother up there. And seeing in her element, which was incredible. But as soon as she started to get off the road, I then went to college. And so then I also didn't really see her except on vacations. And I think in our time together, we really, at least before I started working with her, I think she made a conscious effort not to bring up work and talk about work. And so it was always just me and her. All my friends wanted to come over and get advice from her. And I think that all my friends always used to be like, I'm so jealous of you and your mom's relationship. You basically have free therapy every single day.
But that's not what you want from me.
No, of course. But I think that honestly, it was my friends being validating how incredible she was, that then at that age, I was young. So that is what started to open up my eyes to, wow, she's actually a bigger deal than I think I even know. And I think after college, it was COVID. And so I wanted to go backpack through Asia, and I couldn't because none of the borders opened. And so me and you lived together, if you remember, just me and you, because my dad and my brother had moved up to Vermont because we were between Boston, Vermont, because my little brother was going to school up there. He has dyslexia, dysgraphia, so he finally got to pick his high school, and he picked Vermont, which is where my grandmother lives. And so me and you lived together for a few months.
I blocked this. I don't even remember this.
And I think it was then when I was at home and I had I didn't have a job, and I was just observing her in her work environment, and the team would come over every day. And I remember it probably in that time period feeling as though, wow, she is incredible, because you were online doing speeches and I was in the room next to you just overhearing you. And I think that was the time when I finally started to, I think, just see her in what she actually does in her element, because as a daughter, a son, as a child, there's such another world of your parents that you don't actually see unless you work with them, in my opinion. And I think there's just a whole nother side of you, of your parent as a person, that I just had absolutely no idea. And I think when we started working together a year ago, that is the time that which I, by the way, promised myself that I would never, ever do. I promised myself, literally, I never want to work for my mom. And I think it was a complete ego thing where I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell people that I worked for my mom. I wanted to be Sawyer Robbins, not Mel Robbins' daughter. And I'm going to go get my own job. I don't want a referral. And just as many people experience growing up. But so when I got back from my backpacking trip through Asia, I had no money. And I was so sad because I had just completed a dream. And so a chapter in my life was over and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And before I went to Asia, I was working at a cybersecurity company in Boston, and I knew I didn't want to go back into the corporate world. And my mom turned to me and she was like, Sawyer, I was crying every day and being dramatic. And she said, Sawyer, you need money and I need some help. How about we use this you're not working for me. She said that like 1,500 times. You're not working for me, but I need some help on a little research project that I call the Let Them Theory. And I'm about to pay someone,
Into parenting.
a researcher, a full-time price to do this exact same thing when I can pay you the same and you can get a little income and feel like you have a purpose every day instead of getting up and working out and sitting around. And so
I was like,
you gotta trick
Ninja
your daughter.
parent. Yeah, ninja.
You gotta trick your daughter.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so then I did the research project.
so let me
You can-
address two things here, because I don't think changing your life is glamorous, and I don't think anybody notices when you do it right. I think it's a grueling process. And Chris and I protected our kids as best we could, because I remember the morning they found us when we had passed out in the chairs, and I'm like, I can't expose them to this. I have a responsibility to at least pull it together for them. And Sawyer is painting the story with a beautiful brush, and it also created a lot of heartbreak for us, because ultimately my husband left the restaurant business and was a full-time stay-at-home dad, and I was off on the road saying yes, 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 yes to everything I could, because I was the breadwinner. And we went through so many things in our marriage because I resented the fact that I was in that position, and I was mad that I was on the road all the time, and I was scared about our finances. And I also feel like our marriage is ours. It's not their business. And so I'm happy to hear that we insulated them from a lot of it. But the truth is, me not being there created a lot of distance. And this is a huge issue inside of relationships between parents and children. The tension between admiring somebody and also the mismatch of what I'm providing versus what she needs. And I did not provide what she needed. I had certain examples that I gave about hard work, but I wasn't there. And when I was there, I wasn't present. Like a lot of parents that are working, or if you're a single parent and you're stressed out all the time, your kids are the only people that are going to remember that you worked. No one else is going to. And I very much regret the amount of time that I stayed on the road, because there came a point in time where I was making enough money and we were being super responsible and shoving a lot of it back into savings. And so we were back in a safe territory financially, that I could have started to have better boundaries with work, and I didn't. And it did create a real distance between us because I wasn't there. And I didn't do a good job because I was constantly on edge, constantly stressed. And there's this thing I've learned recently that I wish we had all known, because I would always blame my bad behavior or my bad mood on work. And that's not an excuse. And one of the things that I've learned recently that I wish they would always be like, don't use that tone with me, or like, just because it happened at work, don't bring it here. But there's a great way to say this to somebody, which is, I'm really sorry about what your stress at work did to you, but you're going to have to apologize for how your work stress is impacting me. And I was chief offender in that regard of taking my stress out on my family. Why? Because I didn't know. I didn't have the tools yet. I just knew how to push myself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And, this is a show about legacy. And the truth is, I personally believe that other than the human beings that I impact and my family and my kids and their kids being a legacy, I really do believe the thing that I am leaving on earth is the Let Them Theory. And the process of discovering the Let Them Theory, which ironically happened with my kids as I was micromanaging them and stressing out, and the process of researching and writing the Let Them Theory, it actually healed our relationship.
Oh boy, as a mom, I can tell you, I really understand that story. And we're just getting started with Mel Robbins and her daughter Sawyer. Their story was too powerful, too fearless, and too heartfelt to fit into a single episode. Next week, we'll dive even deeper into how Mel's Let Them theory can transform your life, how it healed their fractured mother-daughter relationship, and the secret to overcoming heartbreak. Trust me, you don't want to miss a moment. Tune in next week for part 2. I promise you it will be worth it. If you enjoyed today's conversation, subscribe and share the podcast with friends, family, and loved ones, and follow us on social media at My Legacy Movement. Until next time, may you find connection and inspiration to live your most fulfilled life.